We are back this week. Last week we did a show, I think pretty much on or the day before trade deadline day.
Yeah.
So we tried to predict some of the moves, and I mean,
I think we
I
got none of
technically
them
we did
right.
get one,
Oh, did we?
but we did get one that is the one that we knew about going into that there was already a lot of reports about Zadarius
Oh,
Smith to the
okay. Well,
Lions,
there you
but
go.
that's okay.
Yeah.
No,
There you
we'll
go.
take credit. We'll take credit for that.
Yeah, there you go.
We'll take credit for that. But now the deadline has actually happened. Trade deadline is over, and I mean, as with the NFL trade deadline in general, there's never like the crazy level of moves that you'll see in the NHL or NBA, but there's some interesting ones to talk about. And we've got, I think, 4 or 5 here um, that we can speak on. We'll start with what I think is the most interesting one, and that is Marshawn Lattimore going from the Saints to the Commanders. So the full trade is the Commanders get Lattimore and a 2025 fifth. The Saints get in return a third, a fourth, and a sixth, all in 2025. What do you think of this trade? Initial kind of reactions so far?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense for the Commanders. I think because they're obviously bringing in a big name defensive guy. They think they're good this year. A lot of people think agree with them, and I don't know. It makes sense. You're at the trade deadline when you're playing at the level that they're playing at. The big goal has to be to bring in more guys to help your push. And that's what they're doing here. They're bringing in a guy who has been an elite corner, a top corner in the league for a long time now. And obviously, you're giving up a third. What was it? A third, a fourth, and a sixth is what they had to give up. Getting a
Yep.
fifth back as well. That's not a terrible haul. That's not a terrible haul to give up. Obviously, a lot of picks, a lot of your mid rounders there, but not too bad. I don't know. What do you think? I'd argue I'm on the side of I think it makes a lot of sense for the Commanders, but what do you
I
think?
am too. I think that this is a very good deal for them, for a couple of reasons. I think number one, this is a player that is much higher quality than the players you would normally see dealt at the trade deadline. At the trade deadline, you usually see players go that are like above average players at most, not necessarily like star level players. And while I don't necessarily know if Lattimore will keep that level just because he's been in the league for a while, you could definitely still consider him in that conversation, in my opinion. And I'd be excited to see the kind of impact he makes on a better team. I do think he's kind of gotten lost in a mediocre Saints team the last couple of years, but
Yeah.
he's still young. He's at least relatively. He's 28. There's still a couple of years left on this contract. He doesn't become a free agent until 2027. His cap hit for this year is crazy low. Some cap magic there. It's at under $1 million. So especially for
What?
this year, if they're trying to make a run, yep. It's at 605,000, which is like I
Huh.
believe less than the veteran minimum, which is crazy. But obviously that then balloons later. But really good for the Commanders this year. So if they want to, there's a potential out in 2025, according to this website. If they want this year, they can take him on for essentially for free in terms of salary for this kind of unexpected championship push. And then if he doesn't play well, they have a potential out. But if he does, then they can keep him under contract for another couple of years. Obviously, significantly bigger cap number at 18 million. But if he plays well, that might be worth it. The only thing is like that is a lot of draft picks, not high draft picks, but a lot of draft picks to give up.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of weigh that to say like maybe are they jumping on it? It depends on how much you believe in the team, like you kind of said. If you think, oh, this is just kind of a fluke and they're jumping on it a little bit too early in terms of this hype train that they've got going on, then this is a bit of a concerning move because you want to have those later round picks to fill out your depth to have a championship run later. But they're going for it. And I at this point in time, they haven't shown me anything to say this is a flash in the pan and that I'd be worried about it. So I'm perfectly okay with Washington making this move. I think it's the best player going to get on the trade market, and I think they still have a lot of options in terms of what they can do with him, which is always good for a team in their situation.
Yeah, I don't disagree at all either. I think that he's going to help them out a ton. Whenever you're adding a player of his caliber, And I agree with you as well. I think giving up those picks sucks. Without a doubt, it sucks. But if you can make a real run at it this early in, obviously, Jane Daniels' contract. How long did you say Lattimore's contract had left on it?
I think he's got another couple years.
Okay.
He's a UFA after 2027, I believe.
2027. So when would
So
Jane Daniels expire?
2025, 2026.
That's more my question.
Jane Daniels would expire technically the year after, like, because this
that kind of works out then.
Yeah, it does. Obviously, they're not going to let Jaden Daniels go to free agency, but taking advantage of the rookie contract, right?
Well, that's what I mean. Like, you're taking advantage of the rookie contract for a while, and then you can let Lattimore go. Let's say he plays well and they keep him. Like, you can let him go at the end of that deal. Just let him walk to free agency. At that point, he'd be quite a bit older, and and you can pay Jane Daniels, and not necessarily have much problem paying Lattimore that $18 million just because of the fact that you don't really have to pay your quarterback that much. They're just not. He's on a rookie deal, and I think that's what they're trying to take advantage of here. I think they realize that they have something special, and even if Jaden Daniels is just going to keep on getting better, he's also just going to keep on getting more expensive. And I think that's almost a more dangerous thing in the eyes of that room, I imagine. Or so I think it makes a lot of sense with the contract. I imagine that plays into it as well, as they know that, like you said, Caleb, if he's not playing well, ditch him, get rid of him. Who cares? Sure, you lose a few picks, but at the end of the day, it's not going to hurt your run. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. I was just going to say no dead cap. Like,
true.
No penalties in that regard.
Well, there you go. Like, you can get rid of him, no problem, no questions asked. If he's playing well, that $18 million isn't that painful, really, compared to what it would be if he went to a team that's already paying a guy like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, the likes, right? Where they're obviously getting paid a stupid amount of money. And then when that $18 million bill comes around for Lattimore, some of those teams are probably going to be like, I don't know if I want to do that. I think Washington has a bit more flexibility than those teams.
Yeah. If we want to kind of shift gears to another team, it's not a rookie quarterback window, but it is a cheap quarterback contract window, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers. They made a couple moves. They got Preston Smith in there, but the one that I want to talk about is the Mike Williams deal. I think that this is fantastic. I kind of talked about it in the picks, but like, this is such a good receiver for Russ specifically in terms of what's Russ's biggest skill. It's the moon ball. It's the deep ball. That's the thing that separated him from Justin Fields. That's why for a long time he was so good in Seattle. Mike Williams will be great at that. When he's healthy, he's one of the NFL's premier contested catch receivers, and I think a lot of the kind of issues that we saw in New York were a New York thing, not necessarily a Mike Williams thing, especially considering I believe it ended up being the game-winning touchdown that Mike Williams caught against the Commanders. So he's already making an impact in the very short window of time that we've gotten to see him. Only giving up a fifth-round pick for him, this is like such a no-brainer for me, and is an amazing move by Pittsburgh that I think will propel them even deeper into the playoffs than they might have already gone.
Yeah, and I don't disagree with any of that either. I think it makes a lot of sense for them here. Obviously you're bringing in a guy for Russ. Like you said, I think that the matchup wise, like a guy who just will work with Russ, I agree with everything you said there. Obviously, like you said, known for his deep ball, Mike Williams, that's what he's good at catching, luckily for them. And I think that's got to be a big part of why they wanted to bring him in here. It's a 5th-round pick, I believe, to bring him in. Again, not bad. Like, you can give that up. I don't think anybody's going to be too mad about it, assuming the Jets don't draft someone crazy with it. But the odds of that are not necessarily insane. You're losing a guy who would, or a pick that would most likely bring in a depth guy more often than not, for a guy who could potentially be a really, really strong make a really strong duo with Russ and add to a pretty half-decent wide receiver room that they're building over there. On a Steelers team that, I mean, we talked about it in your picks. I know you're pretty high on the Steelers this year. I at this point, I'd say I'm on the bus. I think a lot of people think that they could make a run at it, and I think adding Mike Williams certainly helps them do that.
Yep, absolutely. if we want to move on to a division rival of, again, this we talked about it a little bit in that in our predictions, but the AFC North is pretty spicy. There's a couple. The Ravens and the Steelers both made a couple moves. With the Ravens, I'd want to talk about both of them. The one on defense we'll start with, and that's Tre'Davious White on defense. This is an interesting one, kind of bolstering that secondary. It's less of a big move than I think some people might think, just in terms of I feel like it's more name recognition at this point, just because he has struggled with injuries and hasn't necessarily played up to his peak Bills days. There's a reason the Rams were willing to let him go, but it's enough of a bet to say, like, okay, like, if he's able to retain at least a little bit of that form, then that defense becomes pretty scary again. Because that secondary already is looking pretty nice. When you've got your Marlon Humphreys, you've got rookie Nate Wiggins, Kyle Hamilton, obviously, like that's a really good secondary. And if you're the Ravens at this point, you're just looking to add as many pieces as you can and taking a chance on a guy that has been really talented and has just kind of had his career slowed by injuries. What did they give up here? Let's see. They gave up essentially nothing for him. They traded. The Ravens received Tre'Davious White and a 2027 7th, and they traded away a 2026 7th. So they didn't even lose a pick in this. There's really no downside to it. It's just one of those moves that kind of is one of the reasons the Ravens are contenders every year. It's just finding where guys are kind of potentially undervalued and getting a lot of value out of them. Because if he's injured and doesn't work, whatever, you literally didn't lose anything. Yeah. But if he works out, then even to a fraction of the player that he has been, then this is a fantastic move for a team that's looking to finally make that Super Bowl push.
And I think the important thing here that you kind of already pointed it out in the sense of he isn't the same guy he was on the Bills, but that's not what the Ravens need. They have those guys. Marlon Humphrey is terrific. Hamilton's terrific. They've got a great secondary. He just needs to fill a role at this point in his career. And he can do that. He's still able to do that. I think he'll probably, and they're trading for him for a reason. He can do that better than the guy they had in that spot before. And I honestly think, like you said, I mean, it's a 7th for a 7th, and you get a potential of this, bringing in this former all-pro guy. Sure, he's washed up at this point, but he can still do the job. I think without a doubt, this is a win for the Ravens, because how could you not win it? I don't know what his contract looks like. I don't have those numbers in front of me, Caleb. I don't know if you do.
It can't be that bad. I don't, but I can pull them up. But it can't be that bad, considering that the Rams essentially signed him as an kind of just like another shot in the dark.
Yeah.
So it can't be that bad. I'm gonna look it up right here. That's more than I expected. 1 year, $4 million.
Yeah, but it's still 1 year. It's still a 1 year.
Yeah, it's a 1 year.
Let's say he sucks. Let's say he absolutely stinks. Let him walk. Let him walk, and you lost a 7th this year. That just gets passed on to next year, so who cares?
Yeah, and looking at this contract more in depth makes it look a lot better. It was 1 year, $425 million, but for some reason, I don't know if I quite understand this, but the cap number is only $750,000. That feels like a little bit of cap magic to me. That I don't necessarily understand.
It got passed on to next year when he's not on the team.
Exactly. So who knows what that's about, but it makes it look better. So it's an all-around good move for the Ravens. If we want to move on to their other move, in Deontay Johnson, poaching him from the Panthers, really interesting because it's another, I think this is probably the better of the two moves. Another one that they definitively won. They gave up, I believe it was Deontay Johnson and a 5th for a 6th. They moved back one round in the draft to get Deontay Johnson. Again, you're giving up essentially nothing, because you're not losing a pick. You're just moving back, and it's so late in the draft that usually doesn't matter. And it may be a risk to take on a player because he's never necessarily been consistent as a player, but the talent is there. And if that talent shows out in a Ravens team where receiver, they're better than they have been in past years, but it's never really been a strength. If they get the best of him, then that's going to be just a fantastic pair. And again, if they get the worst of him, he's dropping balls and just kind of acting out, and he's not meshing with the team well, then whatever. You moved back one round in the draft. It's not that much of a loss to take a chance on the potential benefits that could be gained here.
Well, I don't necessarily disagree with you. I think that he definitely adds a lot to this team, without a doubt. I think what they're giving up is basically nothing. It's the same pattern we've seen this pretty much for all of them. Obviously, giving up a 5th, getting a 6th back, who cares? It's 2 late-round picks. Carolina obviously don't need them at this point. It's not like they're necessarily losing because that's what they've been doing all year.
Yeah.
They're used to it. So it's weird to say that they lost a trade. But, yeah, I don't know. For me, I think it adds, like you said, even if he is inconsistent, even if that is what you see in a guy like Deontay Johnson, the highs and the peaks there are going to make this trade worth it for the Ravens for as long as he's there. They've got guys who are consistent. They've got guys who can be there for Lamar in the moments that Deontay Johnson isn't. But when Deontay Johnson is playing well, that Ravens team is going to be scary.
Yep. We've talked a lot about trades that have. I mean, we don't necessarily know if they're going to work out, but the value for the team who's getting the player has consistently been very good in all 4 of these trades we've looked at. I want to end the segment on a situation that's kind of the opposite of that. Well, I'm going to lay out this trade, and just keep in mind what we've talked about before, where it's Deontay Johnson for moving back from the 5th to the 6th, or Mike Williams for like a 5th-round pick or whatever, Tre'Davious White for literally nothing. And now I raise you Jonathan Mingo from the Carolina Panthers to the Dallas Cowboys for a 4th. I think that's, other than the Marshawn Lattimore trade, that's the highest pick that we've had thrown around in here for a receiver that has essentially done nothing.
I can't believe it. The Panthers won. They fucking did.
I know. The Panthers won a trade.
They did it.
And not only won a trade, but they fleeced them.
Oh, absolutely.
They fleeced them. It's just embarrassing at this point for a Cowboys organization that is continuing to get worse and worse and worse. And I think the question is this just a sign that like you're gonna have a coup and get Jerry Jones out of the GM chair for this team to ever have a chance to contend again?
A coup with who? Who's gonna? He owns the fucking team. Oh, you don't want him in the GM seat? Oh, well, you ain't having your seat no more either. Like, it's not. What coup? It's not gonna happen.
Someone else buy the team. I don't know.
You're so right. Yeah.
It's just awful because I think this year more than anything has shown Jerry Jones is kind of deteriorating ability, and it's not like he's been like terrible.
Deteriorating. Was it ever there? Was it ever?
Well,
there?
yes, it was.
Like,
because I mean, he built the. To give Jerry Jones credit, he built the Cowboys dynasty of the 90s that got them multiple Super Bowls.
I'm not denying that. No one has ever been denying that he did that in the 90s. I'm saying in every other opportunity that he has had in 30 years. Caleb, you need to understand. If I have a job for 40 years and I do it great for 5 and then fucking stink for 30 years, do you think I'm still going to have a job?
No, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, yes, I completely agree with all of that. I think I was more responding to you saying, like, did he ever have it at all?
No,
yes,
I more mean,
did, but like,
I'm saying in the sense of, like, I mean that more in the sense of, like, overall, is his legacy going to be all that good after, sure, you had the one dynasty, but Cowboys fans are going to hate me. Cowboys fans are gonna fucking hate me. You can give me 40 years in a GM seat, I'd get lucky once. Like it's like he gave him 40 years, like or however many. Like I mean, I have a hard time saying that there's talent in that. You got lucky. You got lucky. Like
Yeah, and I mean, there has been. I'm playing a bit more. I do more or less agree with you, but playing a bit more devil's advocate.
sure.
The Cowboys of the last few years, well, they have not had any success in the playoffs, and that is very much on the GM.
But isn't that
they
the
have
marker for actual success? That's like
yes, it is.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But that my point is just to say there is a large chasm between like the Jerry Jones of the last 30 years, where it's like consistently disappointing and yes, not necessarily very good at his job, and the Jerry Jones that we've started to see in 2024, where
Sure.
he's like
Okay, I see your
calling
point.
out radio hosts and saying I can fire you if you say bad shit about me. And he's making moves like, we really like Jonathan Mingo back in like the 2019 draft, so we're gonna send a 4th round pick, like one of the highest
Has
picks
he
at
been
the
in
trade
league
deadline
for 5
him.
years? What the?
I don't know. That's a
That was
bit
a
that's a
guess,
bit of
okay.
a hyperbole.
Yeah.
It's probably like 2022 or something.
Yeah.
But the point
probably.
the point still stands.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, you know what? Now that you phrase it, I see what you mean. I do agree with you. He has gotten worse. But I just think it's really funny just to kind of like sit here and act like he's some legendary GM and you need to give him like respect
he's
in that
not.
sense. No, he's not.
If he kept the GM seat until even like the year 2000 and then gave
Yeah.
it up to somebody
Yes.
else, I think we could say
Yes.
he's a legendary GM because he built
Absolutely.
the dynasty from essentially nothing. But you've been in that seat for longer than like almost any other GM has, probably longer than any GM has. Period.
Period.
And we've
No,
just
absolutely.
not
Are
seen
you
it
kidding?
since.
There's no. I mean, listen. I don't know this well enough to even like give an idea of who would be close. But seriously, who would be close?
Belichick is the only one that I can think of, and A, that was less, and B,
that was a lot
that streak
less.
obviously isn't going. Yeah, like
Yeah.
that's the only other one I can think of, and he was obviously very successful.
Yes, and to make a point on the Belichick thing, he got fired when he stopped performing. For one, well, not fired, whatever you want to call it, like whatever you want to call him leaving the Patriots. And
Nicely
also,
fired.
you made a point of saying if he left at 2000, then no problem. I don't know the exact year that Belichick came in. If I remember correctly, it was around 2000. Yeah, so I think that says something more than anything else. That when the only other general manager you can think of having that long of a tenure was right when Jerry Jones.
Literally the year 2000.
Yeah,
it was
right
literally
when
the
Jerry
year 2000
Jones
that he
should have
started.
rode his legendary GM coattails into the sky. Right when he should have fucked off was when the only guy. And you know what's funny? At least Belichick knew. He knew he was done. He quit.
Yeah.
So I mean, who knows? Maybe
Yeah.
he'll come back. But like, I think it's really funny. It's a funny conversation to have. Of maybe that's a conversation we have when eventually, not eventually when. I don't want to say it. I don't want to get canceled. But when something happens that causes him to lose his seat, it'd be an interesting conversation to have about his legacy. I'm not going to say
agree.
what that thing would be. You can assume in your own head.
I think we get it.
Yeah, I think you get
I
it.
think we all know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Whenever something happens that eventually knocks him out of his seat.
Anyway,
Anyway.
that was the 2024 NFL trade deadline. Lots of good moves and like a couple, well, one really shitty move.
Yeah, I mean, to just say this as well, I have the list on my screen here. I don't really see any other really bad ones. I guess this was before the trade deadline, like we kind of talked about, but Devontae Adams to the Jets for a third is starting to look bad. But
yeah,
I mean, if he sticks around
that
and
at
has a
least-
few good years, then you could argue won't
there's
be bad.
potential there.
Exactly. There's no potential here. Jonathan Mingo needs to. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. Like what?
No,
what
I
the
don't.
hell? Dak Prescott
No.
specifically asked for Jonathan Mingo. I mean, isn't he out for the year anyway? This joke doesn't even make
Yeah.
sense. Cooper
Taurus
Rush.
and
Cooper Rush watched Jonathan Mingo tape and went, "This is what I need to turn this ship around."
That's my guy.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh god.
That's listen, Jerry. This is the guy I need. I know you could get Mike Williams. I know you could have gotten who else? D Hop. You could have gotten
Deontay.
anyone else. You could Deontay Johnson. Yeah, you could have gotten anyone
Yep.
else. Give me Jonathan Mingo. There you go.